Hello, everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And this is Learning Accounting with CAC. So, today we'll be considering a very important topic, which is increase in provision for bad debt. So, it means that in our previous videos, you have been looking at bad debt and how to make provisions for bad debt. So, now we would like to consider increase in provision for bad debt. Okay, so the first thing that we'll be asking ourselves is what do we when do we say when there is an increase in provision for bad debt, or what does it mean to say that there is an increase in provision for bad debt? So first of all, we have established the fact that bad debts actually arise from the debtors figure. There are some people who will come and buy, and at the end of the day they will not be able to make payments, and as a result we need to make provisions in order to cater for some of these eventualities. So it means that we have already in a way made a provision before, and therefore we are now going to make another provision, because whenever we say there is an increase, then it means that we already have an amount there, comparing that amount to a new amount. So then we'll be able to determine whether there is an increase or a decrease. But then the focus of today's video is going to be on an increase. Okay, so an increase in a sense that there is a provision already in our trial balance, and then we need to make a provision for bad debt also for this very year. So in a situation whereby your current provision is more than the previous provision, then we say that there is an increase in provision. So the current provision, so the provision that we are making this year, that is our current provision, is greater, is more than the previous year's provision. Okay, so in that case, then we'll say that there is an increase. Okay, so it's very simple. It's just like normal um mathematics. So let's say as a student, you want to find out whether your performance has increased over the period. Then you need to compare your previous performance to that of the current performance, and that will tell you whether your performance has increased. So in accounting too, we also do similar calculations. So we will have provisions for bad debts already in a trial balance, and we need to compare with this current provision in order to determine whether there is an increase or a decrease in provision. So that is all about increase in provision for bad debts. So first of all, always look at the provision in a trial balance. When you look at the provision in a trial balance, that is the previous provision or the provision for the previous year. Then the question will tell you to make provision for this year. After making provision for this year, then you compare to find out whether there is an increase or a decrease in provision. Right, so let's look at a very simple example in this video so that it will help you to augment your understanding or to understand whatever I'm saying. Okay, so let's look at this. Okay, good. So we actually have a simple question here, and this question has given us our bad debt figure to be our debtors figure to be 10,000 Ghana cedis, and then we have provision for bad debt already in a trial balance. So if there is a provision for bad debt already in a trial balance, then that is our previous provision. So we need to make provision for this year. In order to make provision for this year, it's always the percentage on the debtors figure. Okay, so provision is mostly quoted in terms of percentages or an actual amount to be given to you. So it's always the percentage on the debtors figure. So it is this percentage here, 10%. Then we calculate it on the debtors figure. Okay. So the 10% on the debtors figure, how much is the debtors figure? The debtors figure is what? 10,000. Good. So 10% on 10,000 is going to give us 1,000 Ghana cedis. All right, so this is actually the provision that we have made for this year. The provision for the previous year is already in a trial balance. So the current year provision is the one that we have calculated for, and that is 1,000 Ghana cedis. Now, as I already did indicated, that anytime we want to know whether we are doing well as even students, we need to compare our performance last year to that of our performance this year. Okay, so when I compare, this is my previous year's provision. Last year, I made a provision of 500, and you are making a provision. This is an expense. So you made a provision towards an expense of 500. This year, you are making 1,000. So it means that your business is not really doing well, and you are having lots of bad debts. You are unable to recover your bad debts. That is why you are making lots of provisions towards that bad debt. So this is an increase in provision of 500. Okay, good. So we'll be looking at how we are going to treat it in our books. The accounting treatment. This is just a mere calculation. It's important for us to know the accounting treatment. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Good. So now this is the just a summary of the accounting treatment. Okay, so we actually have our accounting treatment over here. Okay, so anything that we see under additional information, if you look at my previous video, I did indicated that anything that we or any transaction in the additional information means that it hasn't been treated. If it has been treated, then it will be in a trial balance, because before an item will come into the trial balance, then we need to pass the double entry, and then we take the balances to the trial balance. So any item that will appear on the face of the trial balance, it means that a double entry has been um, adhered to, and then the balances have been taken to the trial balance. But then if that transaction is not in a trial balance, then it means that it hasn't been taken care of, and we need to treat it twice. So the accounting treatment is actually telling us that any transaction in additional information has to be treated twice. And that is why we need to look at which portion or what portion, okay, of the provision that we have made will be taken to the profit and loss, and what will be taken to the balance sheet. Okay, so let's look at the accounting treatment. The accounting treatment here is that when we calculated for the provision, it's always the difference that goes to the P&L. The difference goes to the P&L. Okay, so what is the difference? It is the 1,000 provision that we made this year compared to the previous year's provision, giving us a difference of 500. This 500 here is the difference, and not the the previous year's provision is the difference. So this difference is indicating an increase in provision, which has to be taken to the P&L as part of our expenses. Okay, good. All right, so let me quickly clean this one and move to our next slide. Next slide. Good. Now let's go to the next slide. So this is just how we also show this one on the face of the balance sheet, because as I said, anything under the additional information, like the transaction we saw, it was under the additional information. That is why we need to look at what will go to the P&L, and then what will go to the balance sheet, so that the double entry is adhered to. Okay, so the one going to the P&L is always the difference. The difference goes to the P&L. So you compare the current provision to the previous year's provision, and then the difference goes to the P&L. So when you are done, then the provision that you have made for this year will then go to the balance sheet. And provision is supposed to reduce the debtors figure. So you take the debtors figure and reduce it by the provision you have made for this year. Okay, good. So this is my debtors figure. The debtors figure is 10,000. I made a provision for this year, and I said it is the current provision. Okay, so let me make it CP. That's my current provision. The previous provision was 500, then the current provision is 1,000. So the current provision will reduce the debtors figure, and then we have an amount of what? 9,000 being, let's say, the net debtors figure. Okay, that is good. So now let's also look at an example. You can try our hands on it, on this example, and see if we will be able to do it. Okay, so this is a typical example of an exams question that you are likely to see in any WASI or any undergraduate exam, an accounting exam. So a firm decided to make a provision for bad debt at 10% of the debtors figure or the debtors account, which totaled $50,000 on 31st December 2004. So let's end here. Now, a firm has decided to make a provision for bad debt at 10% of the debtors figure. So provision is always made on the debtors figure. Okay. So even if the question is silent about the provision, note that the provision is always made on the debtors figure. Good. So this particular year is telling you, unlike the one that we saw where the provision for the previous year has already been made, this particular question actually is telling us to make provision for 2000 and what? 4. Good. Now let's make our provision for 2004. It is just the percentage on the debtors figure. So 10% of the debtors figure of 50,000 will give us a provision of 5,000. Good. Now this 5,000 is a provision made for 2004. Okay, good. Now let's come to 2005. On 31st December 2005, the debtors account total 60,000. Okay, so the debtors figure now has moved from 50,000 to 60,000. So it means that now we have a lot of people owing us. Okay, so and then the question is saying that even though the debtors figure has moved from 50,000 to 60,000, the percentage of provision is still 10%. So the question is saying that the firm maintained a provision at 10% of its total debtors. Okay, good. So now let's concentrate on making provision for 2005. This one was 2004. Okay, so in 2005, still the percentage on the debtors figure. Okay, so 10% on 60,000, okay, is going to give us 6,000. Very simple question. This is a very simple question. Okay, so 10% on 60,000 is going to give us 6,000. So in 2004, we made a provision of 5,000. Now in 2005, we are making a provision of what? 6,000. So it means that there is an increase in provision for bad debt. So that is all about increase in provision for bad debt. So when there is an increase in provision for bad debt, calculate the provision for this year compared to that of last year. The difference is always going to the profit and loss. And then the new provision will go to the balance sheet. So in this case, the difference is how much? 5,000 to 6,000. Then the difference is 1,000, which will go to the profit and loss account or profit or loss account. Then the new provision would then go to the balance sheet. It's a very simple way of dealing with provision. Okay, so let's look at it. So actually, I did a calculation and I wrote it myself. So you can see the solution here. Oh, so this one, let me clean so that you can see it very well. So yes. So actually, this is the provision that we made for 2004, which was 5,000. Then now we made a current year provision 6,000. Great. And then also I said the difference in provision will then be taken to the P&L. The accounting treatment is that the difference always the difference is what goes to the P&L. Okay, is the difference that is taken to the P&L as an expense. So it's an increase in provision for bad debts. Okay, and then the new provision, which is the 6,000, because it was 5,000 and then now it's 6,000. Then the new provision. So here, the new provision, which is 6,000. So there is a mistake here. We less the new provision of 6,000 from the 60,000. Then we get 54,000. 54,000. Okay. So the difference is going to P&L. Then the new provision, we made a new provision of how much? 6,000. And that is what is taken to the balance sheet. So in summary, um, whenever we say that there is an increase in provision, that we mean that the provision that we have made for this year, when we compare to the previous year's provision, this year's provision is more than that of the previous year's provision. So we just have to find the difference and determine the increase. And then we take the increase as an expense. And that increase will then go to the profit or loss account. And then the new provision will then be taken to the balance sheet in order to reduce the debtors figure. So this is all about increase in provision for bad debts. Thank you for watching this video, and subscribe, like, and share so that it will go a long way to help most of the students who are struggling with the basics or fundamentals of accounting. Okay, so thank you very much for watching this video. See you in my next video.